Welcome to Behind the Cusp, a podcast diving deep into the layers of self-growth, inner work, and transformation. I'm your host, Marissa Mead, and after 15 years as a digital creator, I'm sharing my raw, unfiltered journey of healing and self-discovery to walk alongside you in yours. Together, we'll dive deep into the conversations that matter most, uncovering what it means to truly evolve from the inside out. This is where you elevate into transformation. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Hello, welcome back to the show. We are here this week on Behind the Cusp, and I hope you guys loved the first guest episode with Morgan. And I feel like even if you are not somebody who's in the same stage of life as her, there's still so many valuable lessons to learn about, identity and growth and things like that. Or even maybe an opportunity to look back in your own life at that time and see things differently, or have just like a different point of view on experiences you had. And I think that's the beauty of growth, is that it doesn't have to happen always in the moment. Like maybe we go through something, but actually learn something about it after the fact. I hope you guys enjoyed that and just enjoyed hearing Morgan's fun adventures and all of that. This week, I am on the mic solo for a really big episode. I just spent the last hour and a half writing out. I was going to just write notes, to be honest, about this episode. And then as I got writing, it just really spilled out of me, which I feel is very fitting. So before I dive into the episode, let me preface it with this. Writing is something that I've always loved. I have journals going back to when I was 5 years old. Literally, I still have them. There's one that's like a vintage Winnie the illustration on the cover of the journal. I would share my thoughts, even from a young age. Writing them out and getting my emotions or thoughts or things out was something that I found therapeutic. I enjoyed it. And so for me to fast forward in my life and start a blog when I was in college is very fitting. But also today, as I sat down to make some notes about this episode, as this was happening and I really just started moving so in flow. When you get into doing something that you love or is natural for you, you move in a flow that is very hard to explain unless someone else has also experienced this, if that makes sense. And so I just started moving in such a flow with writing out this episode almost like word for word. And I don't know if I'm actually going to read it necessarily like word for word, but I do want to reference my notes or my paragraphs of writing very closely, because I feel that this really spilled from the depths of my heart to share with you guys. My career journey is something that I've always been asked about. Like, how did you get started? What did you do? What have you done? Like, what is your career path? Have you always done this? All these different questions. And I realized that so many of you following along have followed me for different stages, for different amounts of time and things like that. So not everyone's been here from the beginning or for a long amount of time. And because my career has evolved so lengthy, if you will, I'm not like a creator that's been online for 2 years and went viral in the beginning and people have been following since the beginning and you kind of know everything about a creator or something like that. My journey looks very different. But I'm diving deep into this journey today about my career. And not because I want to share about myself necessarily, but I think there's some deeply rooted lessons here for all of us to have and hear. Even myself, like listening, like writing this out, you guys, and it was a journey for me to write this out. Let me just tell you, I was emotional writing this out. I'll probably be emotional in this episode. Definitely expect some tears, some choking up, whatever. It was emotional to go back 16 plus years in my life. I'm 36 years old. I started my blog 16 years ago. But I really took this episode back to before then. So like half of my life is basically documented in this episode in a very unique way. So it's definitely from the heart in a way that I was not expecting, but it's probably something I really needed. I feel a lot of shifts coming for this year. I know many of you do too. The conversations that I've had both offline with friends, but then also online with a lot of you in DMs, like there is major shifts happening. There is rapid movement happening. There is rapid momentum that's really rising quickly right now. This is largely in part to the year of the horse and the kind of phases that we have gone through in the Earth's cycles and the cyclical nature, like we touched on a few episodes back. But I feel that deeply. I know you guys feel that deeply. And so I feel that this episode is really timely. And with this podcast, I move very deeply in flow with it. I'm not planning out episodes like weeks and weeks in advance. At least not right now. Maybe that will happen down the line. But this episode was something that came to me, I don't know, maybe 10 days ago or maybe 2 weeks ago-ish. And so that's where I'm moving like in flow and trying to be very timely with what I'm sharing. And so I hope that this episode speaks to you. I hope that you receive it in a time that you need it, whether you're listening to it right when it's launched or weeks later, months later, or even coming back to this years later. I'm excited for this episode and excited to share and touch on everything in it. Also, I am in my luteal phase, so the emotions are high. They're heightened. I think that's another reason why it's also hitting me so hard. So the tears feel like they are imminent at any moment. And so let's walk through this journey together, shall we? We are going all the way back, you guys. And on that note, let's dive right in. I've always loved to write. I have journals going back to when I was 5 years old. I'd share my thoughts as I got older into having dozens of old journals and pages of my writings. Fast forward to college in 2010, I started a blog on a snowy night in my apartment, sophomore year. After one of my girlfriends was talking about hers, she had just started in our fashion consumer sciences class. It was on the platform Blogger through Google and called the Taste and Style Files. I was talking about literally the most random things. I realized that you could also connect with other people and other blogs through something called Google Friend Connect. And so I would start following other ones that I enjoyed, and it was something that was just very casual. At one point, I started sharing my own photos, what I do on the weekends with friends or places that I was going or a recipe I made. But at this point, I didn't even own an iPhone. Instagram didn't exist. It didn't even launch until October of 2010, so months after I started. And even then, you could only get Instagram if you had an iPhone. My junior year of college, I did classes online, but locally to my college. So I went to college at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. And my last year of school, I enrolled as an online student, but was still living like locally in my apartment there with my friends. I wanted to still have the college experience, but it saved me exponential amounts of money to do that and not pay on-campus tuition. While I was in my junior year, I also was doing a fashion marketing internship with Foley and Carina, which is a handbag designer based in New York City. I landed that because it was remote and it was for marketing and SEO and like lots of back-end things that I honestly don't even remember now or probably don't even exist because things have changed so much. I was also writing my blog and I ended up finding this organization called IFB, which stood for Independent Fashion Bloggers. And I signed up for their conference that was during Fashion Week to go because people were buzzing online about it in this independent fashion blogger group online. I actually signed up as a volunteer because I couldn't afford a ticket, but I really wanted to go. And so I drove up with a group of friends to New Jersey. One of my friends lived in New Jersey, and then we took a train, I think, into the city. I ended up staying with the girl that I was interning for at Foley and Carina in her Hoboken apartment, navigating my way around New York City without Google or Apple Maps or an iPhone or anything, and honestly probably ended up in an alley or two where I'm lucky to still be here, lucky to still be alive and not have some traumatic story. Because I know for a fact, I can remember walking through this dark alley being like, where am I? Please, Lord, just spare my life. I'm afraid right now. And I made it. I'm probably lucky I didn't die in that alley. But I worked the conference, the IFB Blogger Conference, soaking in all the speakers that were in a room full of probably all the bloggers that were in the world at that time. There was, 75, maybe 100 of us. And there was a few people that you may know or have heard of: Sincerely Jules, Brian Boyd, Taza, like some of the original OG big time bloggers who have since gone on and created many different facets of their career. But we had a photo shoot with Foley and Karina that week. So I was staying with the girl that I was interning with. I was doing some stuff in the office with her, schlepping around the city for this photo shoot with her, and then attending the conference, kind of using it as like a multi-use trip. And at this photo shoot, this is where I met a girl named Amber Benz. She is the founder of what is now known as LTK. I'm sure many of you know what that is, if not all of you. But it was formerly called Reward Style, and even Reward Style, it had another name that is escaping me at this moment. But when I first met her, it was called something different. She told me about this platform that she was creating where people could buy things online from a link on my blog, and I would make a commission. And I immediately remember thinking, does anyone even read my blog besides maybe the 20 people I'm connected with on Google Friend Connect who are also bloggers? I don't even know at this point if my family was even reading my blog. There was also only 2 retailers on this strange platform that I was learning about: Net-a-Porter and Shopbop, which was newly founded at this time. Both of these sites had super high-end designers, and my poor college wallet absolutely could not afford a single thing on their site. So I remember thinking, okay, this sounds cool, but also not really something I would use. However, at this point, it was like networking was king. And so I took the beta invite that she gave me to join this website as it was in conception and in launch. But I really didn't think much of it for probably at least a year or so. I did, however, share the beta invite, or like I got referral code or something with other girls that I knew at the time. We were all signing up like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. But I don't think I even saw a cent from that for well over a year. Meanwhile, though, the platform was growing, and so was I. My life was expanding and entering into full adulthood. I actually ended up finishing college in 3 years instead of 4. So that quote junior year I mentioned before ended up being my last year of college, which I wasn't even aware of until March or April, right before graduation. So it was a whirlwind of all these things shifting and changing at once. And it was a lot. I was navigating a lot on my own. My parents were going through a really intense and involved divorce that actually had began my freshman year of college and spanned several years after, like well into my 20s. I graduated college in 2011, like I said, 1 year early. And if I could go back, I'd probably take that last year of college because you can't obviously get that back. But also, I probably wouldn't, because I wouldn't be where I am now if I had, you know? I lived with my grandparents after college until 2015 as I grew my business. And so that's what we're going to dive into. I came out of college with a dream of working in New York City in PR or marketing, probably fueled by The Hills when I was in college and like emulating Whitney Port and Lauren Conrad, as so many of us did. But I studied marketing in college with a minor in fashion and consumer science. And so that was my field that I was pursuing. And it was something that I always loved. I had a very marketing analytical type of brain, and I also had always loved fashion and clothes. And there's pictures of me like when I was 3 and 4 years old walking around the house in high heels that were my mom's or my grandmother's. And so these were things that were just innately who I was, you know. The summer after graduating college, I applied for hundreds of jobs in New York City, nailing interviews, and every single time my pop, who I lived with, would drop me off at the train station 45 minutes from our house. I'd take the 2-hour drive in on the train. I'd cab or even walk to my interview, have a 15 to 30 minute interview, and then head right back to the train and go home. So I would do a 5 to 6 hour round trip schlep for a 15 to 30 minute interview because I was a girl pursuing her dream. It was a grind, but I did it every single time. And sometimes for even a second or third round of interviews for the same position. I remember being down to the wire getting for the executive assistant role for NYC PR girl. She was a Twitter personality, DKNY PR girl. She was a big Twitter personality back at that time, and she had put a posting up on Twitter for an executive assistant role, and it was down to me and one other girl to get it. I had gone in for 3 rounds of interviews, really connected with her, and I ended up not getting it. I remember just feeling so crushed. I'm like, oh, that dream felt so close, you know? I think you guys know at this point, I actually never ended up moving to New York City. But I was determined, and I knew I needed a job in the meantime, obviously, after college. So in the fall, I applied for Nordstrom locally in the retail department. I ended up starting there and working in women's shoes. And not gonna lie, I absolutely killed it. My first day on the sales floor, in less than 2 hours, I was the #1 salesperson of the day in the store, making waves with the people that had been there for a year, 5 and plus. They were like, who is this chick? What is she doing? Who is this? You know? So like I said, I'm determined, I work hard, I have that marketing brain, I can sell. And so I ended up working there for several months when upper management actually approached me to go through the Nordstrom management training. I guess they recognized certain aspects or things or qualities about me that would fit well in that department. And so I ended up taking that opportunity. I learned so much through that experience about running a team, running a sales floor, and ultimately the Nordstrom way. This was something that was really woven into kind of the curriculum, if you will, of the management coaching that they have. And this was to leave things better than you found them. A true commitment to excellence. And this is truly how I've always built my life. And so I think that really resonated with me. I was working with a company whose standard felt as high as my own, and it felt like an environment where a lot of my skills could be crafted and honed. So I ended up managing one of the shoe departments for probably 6 to 8 months until I really started to get real with myself and knew that I didn't want to pursue growth within that field, like sales, retail sales, essentially. And so I stepped down and actually went back to the sales floor. I was also making a lot more money on the sales floor. The job was solely commission, and it was 10% of your total sales. And so I knew I needed to kind of leverage that ability to make cash that I had at that time. Meanwhile, during this time, I was also writing my blog, building that. It had evolved to the point where I was like taking photos of my outfits in my house or my backyard, or doing fun like styled shoots where like you'd set up this very elaborate kind of setup and whatnot. I was going to Fashion Week every season at this point, starting in 2012, networking within the PR industry in New York City, building my online presence. At some point in this time, I also got on Instagram. I also, at this time, had co-founded a company called Bloggers Night Out with 5 other girls that were bloggers at the time. We each kind of assumed a different role within the company, and we were throwing events for bloggers at the time during fashion weeks all across the US. So we were focusing obviously on New York Fashion Week, both in the in February and September seasons, and then also Miami Fashion Week and like smaller ones like Charleston and some other cities. And so I was the events coordinator, and so I was kind of managing all of the different facets of the event and the timeline and booking different people for different things. We did that for, I would say probably 2 years at that point, probably through like 6 or 7 different events. And our first event, I remember we booked this venue that I had gone into the city and kind of scouted for, but we booked this venue and literally had no idea how many people would come, because at this point it was 2012. That IFB conference I went to was a year before. And 2012, there definitely started to be more traction within like the blogosphere, as we called it back then. And Lucky magazine was putting on like a blogger conference too. So there was like more things happening within the whole like blogging world, online presence, magazines were kind of had hit their peak, and now there was this online thing that was taking off. And not just from magazines, but from people, like real people having their own websites and sharing their own fashion expertise or outfits or whatever. And it wasn't just this editorial styled thing on the pages of Vogue. And so we hosted this event, and our first one, we really were only leveraging, I think, Twitter at the time, because we didn't have Instagram. Not everyone at that time had Instagram, because you could only have it if you had an iPhone, like I said before. So there wasn't really Instagram. It wasn't something that was like pushing hard now where you can like blow things up or whatever. So we were sharing about this on Twitter. You guys, we actually ended up having over 400 people the first event that we had. And we had a like liquor sponsor. We had all different fashion booths. There were different clothing things there, like Soul Society, which doesn't even exist anymore. We had like signed them on as a sponsor to come and have a booth. And Blues, I think, was another one. And there was others too that are totally escaping me now. But we were expecting, we were like, maybe 50 people will come. We had a line out the door, wrapped around the block in New York City. It was dark. It was cold because it was February. And we, like, gosh, I'm sent back right now, because that was a time. And crazy to even think about, because now there's a bajillion events that happen during Fashion Week for influencers and bloggers and all of that. And honestly, I think we were one of the original ones. And that's why we garnered so many people and the word spread so fast. Because we were doing this in a time when the world of fashion was transitioning, like I was saying, from the editorial, hardcore, like magazine, Kelly Catrone, PR, evolution, whole vibe, into this more approachable, real, everyday girl type of thing that was on the rise because of the online blogs. And so we had an event where anyone could come if they just signed up and got a ticket. And so over 400 people came. I don't even think we got everyone in the door that night. We had to literally turn people away. We had made goodie bags. I want to say we had 50 or 100, and clearly those were gone real quick. So that was a time. 2012 was marked by Bloggers Night Out for sure. I was working at Nordstrom, all of those things, but 2012 was big for Bloggers Night Out and building Style Cusp as well. Moving into 2013, I actually was dabbling in a move to California, in Southern California, and like recreating a whole life. I didn't want to stay in Connecticut, and I was being pulled away. It wasn't ever somewhere I wanted to be long term, but I didn't really know where to go. The New York thing didn't really pan out or work out. It didn't come to fruition. And so I mapped out this move to California at the beginning of 2013. And I was ready to go, literally had my road trip stops planned and everything. And in April of 2013, that plan was completely halted, like literally halted, because that was when everything with my back first really exploded. I ended up slipping a disc. I was in excruciating pain where I couldn't even stand up straight. I couldn't walk for weeks. I was on bed rest, seeing neurosurgeons and people at the UConn Medical Center in Connecticut, and that ended up being like a 5-month-long journey, trying to figure out what to do, what was wrong. I was only 23. They're like, we can't operate on you. You're so young. And it's crazy to think that my whole entire journey with my back lasted over 10 years. I had my back surgery in 2013, but really it originated I had my back surgery in 2024, but it originated all the way back in 2013. So at that time with my back, I obviously didn't go to California either. I ended up having to be on disability with Nordstrom. My job at Nordstrom was 100% commission based. So my disability was based on my total production or sales level. So thank God that I stepped down from the management role and that my numbers were way higher than the salary that I was getting as a manager. Even back then, I can look back and say this now, but not realizing it at the time, that I was just listening to the inner knowing and guidance and like overall vision that I was given for my life ended up having a huge impact on me. While on bed rest, I was blogging the whole time. It gave me the space to really contemplate what I wanted. And I realized from then and from there that I couldn't depend on a job or an organization or a company. And I didn't want to be limited in the amount of money that I could make or the amount of days that I could take off or how much I had to work or not work or whatever. I basically wanted and needed to forge my own way. And this experience that I was having was really showing me that, because I was like, I'm bound by the situation that I'm in right now. And if I can build something bigger and greater than any type of situation like this, then I'm not limited in my life. I went back to Nordstrom in the fall of that year after I was cleared from my doctors and everything to be able to bend and lift and all that again. I was working the shoe department, so it was constantly up and down, and there was like flights of stairs in our back room to get all the different shoes and things like that. So I had to make sure I was like physically able to do my job. And I also was doing this to just get some cash back in my bank. Like the disability was only a certain percentage of my full paycheck. I needed money after not working for 5-6 months. I think it was like April to October. Around this time, I also took a position with a local payroll processing company to run their marketing and like SEO. And SEO was something that was very new at the time. This was not something that was very well known or even understood. And honestly, I was learning a lot about it at the time too. So I took on this job because it was a desk job. It wasn't going to be taxing. I could do it with my back. And then I actually also decided to take on my own social media clients because I was learning and understanding the world of social media. I had been in it since it essentially launched and started, and I was working with them and their marketing plans and all of that. And so I had 2 of those. So my life was packed. I would work Monday through Wednesday at the payroll place. That was a part-time marketing role. I'd leave Wednesday afternoon and I would go to Nordstrom from 4 to close down the store. I'd work at Nordstrom from Thursday through the weekend. Somewhere in between those marketing and Nordstrom shifts, I would be managing my clients. I would be posting for my clients, emailing the owners back, whatever. I'd be writing my blog in my lunch breaks or in wee hours of the night. Again, doing everything I could to build the life that I was envisioning, that I was dreaming. I remember hitting 10K on Instagram during one of my payroll marketing shifts, and I left the office to go get a manicure down the road during my lunch break to celebrate this milestone. And I can literally close my eyes and go back right now and feel myself in my car at the time, looking down at my nails, taking a photo of the manicure that I had just gotten and sharing it on Instagram. I need to go back in my feed and scroll and find that photo. But I'm going to pause here for a second from the whole story and just say that it might be easy to look at my life now. You know, I'm living in Florida and, you know, going back and forth from Connecticut and all these things. And it might be easy to look at that and think that I have it all, or it looks glamorous, or I get to do things that the person who works a typical 9-to-5 job doesn't. You know, I can go to Pilates at 10 a.m. if I want to, or whatever. And while that may be true in a certain capacity, in a certain extent right now, I worked really hard for this life. I went without a lot of things for a long time. I didn't have handouts from my parents. I didn't have things to fall back on. I had no choice but to make things happen. I sometimes had no idea during this time period how I would pay my bills, how I would get groceries, if I would make my car payment. I was dealing with massive emotional fallout of my family, with neither parent really in a stable place to turn to for advice or help or even support. I worked multiple jobs, sometimes 60 hours a week, while building the life that I wanted. I sacrificed hours of sleep at night to build my website. I learned back-end coding because I couldn't pay someone to do it for me. I went through a debilitating back injury at 23 that made me immobile for months. at such a young age. I navigated all of this as an early 20-something graduate trying to find her way in this world. I'm not the girl who's easily gotten 1 million followers overnight or gone viral with 2 videos that put me on the map, per se. I still work hard. I still have my grind days, my grind seasons, as does everyone, no matter the level. But it doesn't come easy. Good things don't come easy. Good things are built in the micro moments, in the hard moments, in the moments of sacrifice. It takes a lot of time, planning, effort, balance, trying, failing, growing, changing, And these are all still things that I am learning and growing and changing through. There's never a point where you've arrived, per se. Maybe I've accomplished things that were on my vision board back then now, but now I have greater visions and greater goals and greater things that I'm working towards. And so, back to the timeline. We are at the start of 2014. I was hanging on by a thread at this point. Like I said, working at essentially 4 jobs between marketing and Nordstrom and 2 clients and my blog. It was a lot. I was burning out. I decided that I had to quit Nordstrom because ultimately, yes, it was providing me financial stability in some capacity, but it wasn't moving me towards my ultimate dream. I was definitely scared. I knew I'd have way less money at this point, but I kept the marketing job because it gave me more experience in my field. It was furthering my career. I knew it was something that I could have to grow in my field, whether it was for me personally or my clients or wherever kind of my career was taking me. But that was a scary jump. I remember literally being like, okay, I know I make $600 every 2 weeks from this part-time job, so that's $1,200 a month. That can cover my rent, my car payment, my groceries, my gas, whatever, like pretty much down to the penny. And then I was relying on the money that I'd have from my clients and or money from my blog, which was really nothing at the time, for anything extra. Like if I wanted to go out with friends or buy something new for clothes or whatever. It was a pinch of pennies for me, for sure, for months. But I knew I had to take this leap. So I quit Nordstrom. In May of 2014, I got my first sponsored post or project ever for my blog. It was the brand South Moon Under. They paid me $150 for 3 blog posts. So we had like a mini series. And I remember just being over the moon. I remember thinking that if I could just get a few of those every single month, it would cover some bills and some groceries, and I could really make this happen. Like maybe I could quit that marketing job. By August 2014, so literally just 3-4 months later, I knew I had to take the leap. I wasn't necessarily ready to take the leap, but I knew that if I waited for ready, I would never ever do it. I walked into my boss's office at the payroll company and I gave her my notice. But right after that, I actually placed a pitch deck on her desk and I offered to take them on as a client of mine. See, I wanted to keep that job, but I wanted to do it in a way that aligned more with where I was at and where I was headed. They still needed the work that I was doing to get done, and so they agreed to let me go as like an employee, but then have me take them on as a client. And so I remember walking out that day and I was like, oh my God, it's happening. I'm running my own social media marketing consulting mini firm, if you will. At this point, I had 3 clients and I called it Cusp Consulting. And then I was doing Style Cusp and started to have these little projects, with brands. At this point, Reward Style / LTK was also really building, and brands were starting to realize the value of a blogger. I keep saying blogger because that's what we were back then. We weren't called creators or influencers or digital this or that. It was literally like you were a blogger. At the beginning of 2015, 4 months after I had left that role and took them on as a client, We actually parted ways totally amicably, but we just kind of phased out my work. And I believe I actually also around this time phased out the clients that I was working with as well. And now it was full-time Style Cusp. My heart and soul, the platform that I had built was growing into something. The hard work was paying off. The sleepless nights were replaced with sleep, finally. And so from 2015 to 2017, I was all hands on deck. My life was building this brand, this presence, this platform. I moved out of my grandparents' in-laws apartment and into my first apartment. I had nothing but a mattress and my clothes for weeks there. My first month's rent and security deposit were basically all the money I had in my account. So it was definitely a slow process to furnish it. But I started leveraging my contacts within the industry that I was making at the time. I was going to New York City all the time for every event that I was invited to, for every fashion week, for everything. And I had tons of contacts all across the industry with brands and PR firms and everything. I started leveraging that with my brand and started sharing more home content. And so that's how I ultimately ended up getting furniture in my home. My couch and living room stuff was from Raymore and Flanigan, and my dinette area with my table and, credenza, whatever you call it, was World Market. My office I did with this company called Havenly. They would do an online design of your home, and I worked with them and they gave me all the furniture and everything. I worked with Wayfair for my TV stand. Literally, you guys, I couldn't afford to buy all this furniture, so I was leveraging my presence online to get it, basically. Moving into 2016, that was really the explosive year. I just did a kind of 2016 recap because, everyone's like 2016 is the new 2026 or whatever right now, but I just did a recap, if you will, on my feed, and that was fun to go back and revisit. But that was definitely the explosive year. Brands were reaching out from every angle. I was traveling a ton, working with hotels and travel groups and whatever. And this was the era of, if it was the fall time, you would travel somewhere in the fall to wear all your fall outfits and share them. There was also no algorithms, and LTK was set up very differently. There was no app at the time. People would screenshot your Instagram to shop it. They would get an email and they would immediately go and shop. And so the sales were definitely more prevalent than they are now. I was making really good money for someone at my age at this time. So I went from pinching pennies, wondering how I'm going to pay my bills in my grandparents' in-law apartment, to not being able to furnish my apartment, to making really good money for someone that was my age. I was having these constant pinch me moments what is even happening? Still going to Fashion Week, still writing blog posts, and at this point I was 7 years into what I started in college. I was approaching 2017. Wow, things feel like they're finally starting to take off. And this was 7 years in. In February of 2017, I ordered a starter kit of oils, essential oils from Young Living. And within weeks, I realized how much I loved them, how impactful they were, how incredible they were. And this whole brand and business really aligned with my lifestyle. I was very non-toxic or cleaner product focused. And so I started sharing them on my platform on Style Cusp, and I ended up pursuing the business side there, growing my team to over 15,000 people and doing nearly $1 million in sales a month, which, even saying that out loud, feels insane to think about now, but we were an incredible team. As someone who's always been passionate about the wellness and non-toxic living, it was a seamless integration for me from a brand standpoint, but I also felt myself stepping into this business leadership role, suddenly having women looking up to me to grow their businesses, to learn about social media, coaching them on growing a platform and all of that. And so I was really marrying two things in my life that I was passionate about and excited about. And I think that's why that business grew so much, because there was so much passion and excitement about it. I wasn't selling a product I didn't care about. I was sharing something that I was genuinely loving and using in my everyday life. And I also was thinking about the future of my life and brand and all of that. And I knew I didn't want to be like slinging links for the rest of my life and use my LTK like for the rest of my life. And so I was building another stream of income. Up to this point, I had read plenty of books. Like, I'm a big reader, always have been. And I would absorb anything I could about like business, entrepreneurship, all of that. And so I was reading all these books, and up to this point, everything that I had read was a smart entrepreneur always has at least 7 streams of income. And so once I felt like one stream of income was stable, then I started building a second one. I ran my Young Living business hard. We hit the ground running. We ran it hard. That was like a well-oiled machine. I poured so much into that beyond something that I could, just as I started Style Cusp and growing that blog and what I did to take that full time, I took that same energy, dedication, determination, and I did that with Young Living too. I ended up hitting one of the top ranks in the company within 2 years of joining, which was not a very common feat, if you will. Our team was incredible, passionate, excited, driven women. I learned so much about myself during this time, about leadership, about how to lead. I wasn't necessarily doing it perfectly per se, but I was doing it the best way that I could at that time with what I knew. Oftentimes I would be hosting calls and team meetings with 50 to 100 women at a time. And I would prep those calls for an hour or two before and go over an outline, and we'd have all kinds of things that we were working on, team promos, whatever. And I was doing all of this at the same time that I was still running Style Cusp and working with brands and doing photo shoots and posting every day and all of that. And I poured my heart and soul truly into that business and that team. There were certain times of the year or days that I wouldn't leave my desk while I was building that team and helping other women, the relationships, the experiences, the places that I traveled, the things that I did with Young Living are things that I will cherish forever. It is a huge part of my life and my story, and it still is. But these things changed for me from a business standpoint specifically after some unfortunate and unforeseen changes within my team that really deeply, deeply affected me and some of my relationships. It became too painful for me to be involved with anymore, and I had to step back. And it was something that I was really blindsided by, and I was so shocked that I had to take the space to process what I was going through. But also, the overall direction of the company was something that I wasn't really aligned with, in the sense that at the time I was working directly with corporate, trying to help them like evolve, if you will, within the company, because the industry and the world at this point was growing so rapidly in e-commerce and online presence, and there was this new age of the influencer creator like coming about, and we needed to rapidly evolve the company to really mirror where the world was headed in those ways. And they were just stuck in their old ways and lagging behind, and there was like technical things beyond comprehension of like struggles, and I just hit a breaking point. I realized that I was kind of beating a dead horse, and I was spending so much time and energy pouring my expertise at the time into meetings and calls with their corporate team and all that, and nothing was ever changing. And so these two things really shifted things for me with Young Living. And I know that this is something a lot of you ask about. And that's about as in-depth as like I'm willing to go on those topics, but I think that's probably the best explanation, that I can give. That being said, Young Living is still very much part of my life. I use my oils every single day, tons of them. My diffusers are always pumping. My house runs on Thieves Cleaner. My hormones are supported by Progestins Plus, and that's not changing anytime soon as far as I'm concerned. My business run with Young Living taught me so much about myself. It was a stretching period for sure. It was pushing me into a new phase. It was carving out an aspect that hadn't been. You know, I was working and building my own business, but then I was thrust into this role where I was working with and building other people's businesses with them and coaching them and leading by example and exemplifying what I was essentially preaching. These are invaluable lessons that I carry with me now. There's things that I absolutely would not change. There's things that I can go back and be like, oh, cringe. I hate that I said that on that Zoom call or whatever, and I learned from. But I'm deeply grateful for that phase of my career because it gave me so much of what I have now. It was a driver for me to accomplish a lot more in my life and really set the stage for the next phase of my life and my world. It enabled me to take off several months of work following my broken engagement in 2018. I was unable to function, literally, as you guys know from that first episode, for those first few months after. And I was able to take the time and space that I needed because of the team that I had built with Young Living. I had passive income rolling in and I didn't have to worry about posting links or brand projects or whatever during that time. And I am so grateful for that. In 2019, I was able to buy my first home at the age of 28 as a single woman, and it was my dream home, or is my dream home, after looking for nearly 2 years. It was meant to be. I was meant to wait those 2 years because when I started the process of looking for a home, what I was able to buy or afford drastically changed when I actually bought my own home. So many other offers had fallen through, and I'm so glad that I waited that 2 years because everything truly aligned in the most beautiful way. Buying that house was massively enabled because of my Young Living business. It allowed me to level up, if you will. And then in 2021, I decided to escape Connecticut winter, which, if you know Connecticut winter, you think it's spring and it never is. I was just saying to a friend yesterday, how do New Englanders always fall for this? It's like, ooh, you get a nice spring day, you think it's coming, and wham, we're hit with another snowstorm. It's the same every year. It never changes, and I just had enough. And so in 2021, I decided to escape that. I came to Florida for what I thought was going to be a month. It ended up turning into 2.5 months. And again, being able to make those quick decisions and extend a trip like that and not have to worry necessarily about the financial aspect of it was because of my Young Living business. And so while I was running that Young Living business, like I said, Style Cusp was still going. It was still running. I was running both of these solo, by the way. Don't even ask me how I did it because honestly, I don't even know how now. The Marissa now wishes that she had the discipline and determination of the Marissa then, let me tell you. Somehow I did it all. And yes, I did end up onboarding different people to my team within the last several years. But when I was building all of this, I wasn't doing it with teams or assistants or anything like that. All of this was on my own. I can go back and almost say that 2016 to 2020 era was the golden era. Everything was moving and grooving and growing and flowing easily. And I'm sure that many of you can say that too about different things in your own lives. I was working with dream brands, dream people, going to dream places, Target, Nordstrom, Abercrombie, Athleta, Walmart, Lululemon, meeting people like Carrie Underwood at Fashion Week, and just to name a few of people and places and things. But I've since attended 14 fashion weeks. I've sat front row at incredible shows, seeing these artful fashion masterpieces that designers have created. There's nothing like that feeling when you are sitting front row at a show. The lights dim all the way down. Everything is silent. You could hear a pin drop in the room right before the lights burst on and the first model steps out on the runway. There is this rush that I can't even explain, but I'm lucky to have experienced that. I've also been sent to so many beautiful travel destinations, experienced places that I used to only dream of because of this life. And it was definitely different back then. in that golden era. It was a creative era, as I would probably call it. Video content wasn't really around yet. It wasn't really big until 2020, where we had this huge shift, obviously, in our world. And that was obviously fueled by COVID, where everyone was home, everyone was on their phone. It began this new era of trends, like the trend era. It was if you did a cool dance or the latest sound or whatever, the algorithm fueled you. It grew you. The OG style of creating was lost, in my opinion. It was a craft that we started all the way back in 2010. And suddenly everyone was replicating each other instead of creating from a stance of originality. Algorithms didn't really exist or hide your content before this. It was easy to grow online. I was soaring by thousands every week. I remember hitting 100K and I was like, oh my God, I'm on my way to 200K. And suddenly there was this thing called the algorithm that just boom, halted it. And it was like, what? But it was easy to grow online then. It was easy to manage multiple accounts. I was doing that with Style Cusp and Cusp Essentials and growing both platforms, and they were rapidly growing. And as these platforms grew, new ones also came out and were rising to compete. It used to just be Instagram, and then Snapchat was big and using Snap Stories, and then that kind of phased out and went, and then there was like Vine, and then, TikTok kind of, I think, put out Vine, or Vine closed down or whatever, and then TikTok came on the scene. Like, there was always another platform coming out, and there was always another platform that was one-upping the next, if you will. Our attention spans changed. We needed new dopamine hits because they weren't good enough anymore. Quick hits, and the platforms were evolving to deliver what the consumer was calling for. They were starting to become so in depth with these algorithms that they were learning our behaviors and are like almost reading our minds. They began to analyze our every move, and the fun content that we once created suddenly became this strategy and numbers game. And it was almost like exhausting. Working in this digital field for so long now, I've witnessed so many different variations of it. The clunker blogger platform with Google Friend Connect to follow each other. Instagram launching. I remember Instagram launch and everyone was obsessed with it, and I couldn't get it because I didn't have the iPhone, and then I did, and it was like every photo had that stupid sepia filter on it, The phase of no algorithms existing and actually seeing the content you wanted to see and seeing the people that you actually follow. I've seen how digital media has quite literally changed and shaped our world, especially being someone who was in the digital media era as well, not just like growing up as it rose, but quite literally working in it. How we consume content, how many people's lives even revolve around creating it. But now, in 2026, I think we are finally seeing an end to that. We are seeing the rise of the real creator come back. People don't want quick fixes and trends. They want realness. They want depth. And as a true creator who began when creating was all we did, I feel like I'm finally taking this big exhale, because the real true voice that I've always had in my content is finally rising again. It's finally being prioritized again. People are returning to wanting that in their feed. It's not being shushed down by trendy dances, but it's rising by being ourselves. There's depth again. There is substance to content again. It's rising, it's shifting, it's returning, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I think there is a small group of OG real creators who will probably 100% fully understand what I'm saying now. Maybe newer creators, and this is no knock to anyone in any part of their journey, but when you've been there for so long, you can witness and see things differently. Like, some people may look at it as like, oh, this is just the phase that it is now. But I think someone who has the length of time in their pocket, if you will, that the era of women that I started this with, like, we can look at it and say, this is a return to true creation. And it's a beautiful thing. Here we are in 2026, and it's so crazy to think that that one snowy night on February 3rd, 2010, to be exact, I started a blog called The Taste and Style Files, and it ultimately changed the entire course of my life without me even knowing it at the time. It was a seed I planted, not knowing how it would grow, what it would become, and really having no vision for it, but just returning to something that felt true to me, and that was writing. I had no idea if everyone would even read it or that I would be writing it for years to come, but it was something that I was just led to at the time, and I followed the inner knowing or inner nudging or inner intuition to just do it. I had no idea that I'd be writing it for years to come or monetizing it several years later, pivoting, changing the name several times. At one point it was the Style File, and then I rebranded again as Style Cusp, and here we are all these years later, still that. And never thinking that it would be a business. But that blog, starting that blog, it was a decision that has defined my life in exponential ways. It has shaped me into who I am and what I've become. It's given me endless joy, countless opportunity, a foundation to grow and launch literally anything that I could possibly want. And I have always said from the beginning, I can go back, remember saying this for over 10 years now, I have no idea where this will go, but I do know that it will always be the foundation for what's next. And even this podcast launching last year, I know I didn't necessarily put that into the timeline, but in 2025, I launched a podcast after it being on my vision board for so long. It's an extension of that brand. It's because of the foundation of the brand that I built. And it was something that was launched from that foundation. The podcast was birthed out of the countless conversations that I have had with you guys over the years in DMs. The way that I've shared my life online, authentically, real, raw, documenting the growth that I've gone through, documenting the tough seasons that I've navigated, documenting how I've overcome it all. I didn't shy away from that because I always wanted to bring the element of realness, of connection to my content. I didn't do those trendy dances, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that wasn't me. And I've never been willing to sacrifice who I am for the success of my platform, even if it was, meaning that it would happen faster. I stayed true to who I've been this whole time. And through it all, you as an audience have been a place of safety in my life. You've been a constant. When things around me have shifted, I've always had this community that we've built together. We may not be the largest community out there, but I know that we are one of the strongest. I love that there is so many of you that have been here for so long. You've watched me walk through a lot of these phases that I just openly shared here in this episode. You've watched the journey. And the purpose of this podcast is to share the deeper parts of that journey through it all, into the transformation and into the new heights and layers of our lives. I don't have this podcast for myself. I have this for you guys as an extension of the brand that I've created, that we've built together, that we've connected in together to continue to encourage you and uplift you and elevate your life through transformation. Because we've always been in it together. We've grown, we've changed, we've aged, and we've evolved every single day, every single year since day one. And so Style Cusp isn't just a brand. It's who I am. It's a living timeline of my own becoming. It has grown up with me, quite literally. It's gone through heartbreak. It's gone through disability. It's gone through ambition. It's gone through success and through reinvention. It has every version of me. And what is so wild to me is that I didn't build Style Cusp. Style Cusp has built me. Style Cusp has taught me resilience. Style Cusp has taught me leadership. It's taught me risk. It's taught me surrender. It's taught me that alignment matters more than income. And that the evolution of who we are is so inevitable. When I think back to the snowy night in February 2010, sitting in my college apartment on the black couch that we had, starting a blog, there was no strategy. There was no followers. There was no income plan. There was no management companies. There was no nothing. It was just me with a desire. It was just a desire to write. And from that, I realized something. That it was never about becoming an influencer, because that didn't exist. It was never about the fashion week or the brand deals or an algorithm or reaching a certain level or status. It was about following that pull, the quiet inner knowing to just start. And every chapter since, the internship, the blogger's night out, those train rides into New York for the interviews, all my shifts at Nordstrom, the back injury that ultimately lasted 11 years, the burnout, the leaps forward, the golden era of blogging, if you will, and all the pivots and the heartbreak and the reinventions of myself. These all are branches from the one seed that was planted. Style Cusp didn't explode overnight. It wasn't a one-hit wonder or a quick rise to anything, but I think I love that part the most because it has carved out a depth to me, a depth to this brand, a depth to the longevity of even where it's headed. It's been here for 16 years and it's not going anywhere now. It was built in the late night hours. It was built when I was laying in bed and I couldn't move, and in moments when I had absolutely no safety net. And so, if there's anything that I want you to take from my career journey, it is this. You don't need a full map. You don't need to see where you're going to end up. You just need to plant the seed. You don't need certainty. You just need willingness. I didn't know where this was going to go, and I still don't. I have dreams, I have visions, I have goals, but I still don't know. But here's one thing that I do know. The life that I have today exists because I kept choosing to build it. I kept pursuing it. Even when it was inconvenient, even when it was slow, even when it was hard, even when it was painful. And that same gift is available to you too. I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Behind the Cusp. If you love this episode, I'd so appreciate it if you'd rate, review, or share it with someone else who's also on their path of self-growth. These all go such a long way in supporting the show. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me over on Instagram at Style Cusp and follow the show Behind the Cusp. And as always, keep tuning inward. True transformation begins from the inside out.